All right, welcome back to episode 2 of the Protocols podcast. Today we have myself, I'm back, right? And then we have Mr. Richard Wyatt, who's now over here because my overlay is all messed up and weird and wonky. Welcome back, Wyatt. And then, of course, down there we got Mr. Kai. Kai, how you doing? We're all back.
Doing all right.
We're here to break down the second half of ATP2. We're down one Godfather, but that's okay. We'll make it work, right? Right.
Yeah.
We'll put the little ATP logo in his screen down there. So when we bring up the next part here, so we left off with Aerial Bots in the last one, which was our first combiner, and now we're going to start with the next combiner, which is the wonderful Menasor and the Stunticons. So, this was spoiled by Vector Sigma's own Scott Landis, and let's just break it down just like we broke down the aerial bots. We're going to let Kai kick us off on this one. Oh, I'm sorry, Wyatt, you're going to kick us off on this one. So why don't you give us the start, and we'll each individually run down some of the stuff.
Yeah, this is the second of 2 combiners in the set that we worked on. Like we mentioned in the last episode, we actually ended up testing versions of 5 of the 6 Wave 2 combiners. We ultimately decided that to pursue some of the the 5-man teams as opposed to the 6-man teams, and even then, Predacons are not in this set. Although we did really enjoy testing with that lineup. It's not to say it's not precluded from a future set. But this one, the Stunticons, were a very interesting one to pursue for a couple of reasons. So in the last episode, we talked about the quote unquote what we call the acceleration ability on the new leader provided for the aerial bots, which is Silverbolt. In the original first draft of these combiners of these teams, the only one to have that acceleration ability was the Stunticons. They were the first ones to have that ability brainstormed on them, so they were kind of the originator of the idea that we should be we should be taking what they're doing. What they're doing isn't necessarily not powerful; it's slow. So if we can take what they're doing that's powerful and speed it up, then that's perhaps answering one of the major problems. So, speaking of the new leader, we have a new Motormaster, Stunticon Dawn, which is a great name. It's a fantastic name. It's just true. I like names. We've talked about this before, but I really enjoy names. Anyway, so Motormaster is, and thank God for this. I don't think we talked about this in the last episode, but we managed to get all 4 of the traits on this character, which was very difficult, I'm not going to lie. Yeah. But he is a leader, Stunticon, truck, and melee. He's got it all, which makes me very happy. And this Motormaster, Stunticon Dawn, is an 8-star character to supplant the previous leader of Stunticons. He's a 3-12-3 in alt mode, and has 2 abilities. One, he has the kind of classic Motormaster ability, but rephrased a little bit. So it says, your other Decepticons can't take non-attack damage from your opponent's cards. So Motormaster himself still can, but your other Decepticons can't. Your other Autobots can, because Motormaster doesn't care about Autobots. But he also has an ability much in the vein of the previous Soundwave that we were just talking, the previous Silverbolt, which is that when the game begins, you choose a different Stunticon character you own from outside the game that isn't Motormaster Stunticon leader. Put it into your KO area in alt mode, fully damaged. So the word different there does a lot of heavy lifting, because different means that you're picking a character not in your lineup and not presently in your KO area. So that means that you have to, let's say that you're playing, I don't know, you can't have a drag strip in play and also put a drag strip in your KO. You can't do that. The wording doesn't allow for you to. And then once you flip him to the other side, he loses a defense for an attack, so it becomes a 4-12-2, and he also is no longer a truck. But he keeps the ability that your other Decepticons can't take non-attack damage in this mode. So one thing that's kind of different from the original one, which is the original one kind of only allowed you to prevent non-attack damage when he was in his alt mode. But this Motormaster actively wants to flip because of the mechanic of the way the acceleration ability works. So giving him access to that ability on both sides really felt like a much more cohesive gameplay experience from a design perspective. And on this one, he also says, when one of your Stunticons with 5 stars or fewer, so not him, attacks, and you flip at least orange-blue, so a mixed pip requirement, you may flip that character to another mode. which is already in line with the way that Sunicons kind of wanted to be played. They were already put you some incentive into being mixed pip. Look at Drag Strip. I mentioned Drag Strip earlier. When he attacks in his alt mode and you flip orange-blue, you get to draw 2 cards. So this character is kind of like leaning further in that direction. And to go with that, we also have the front strat. Should I pass it for the front strat?
Pass it to Kai.
I'll pass to Kai for the front strat. Take it away, Kai.
No, he'll take both parts stretch. I'll take upgrade.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, so this side begins face up on the Motormaster side, and when each of your Sunicons has bold 1, similar to the Silverbolt 1 to allow for the acceleration without needing to focus too heavily into just playing bold cards. And then when you have, at the end of your turn, if you have 5 Sunicons in bot mode or on the battlefield or in your KO area, you can combine them into Menasor, and then you would flip this when you combine. So from there, you would flip to the other side that applies to Menasor. It gives him +1 attack and +5 health. And when you would play your second action during your turn, repair 1 damage from Menasor. And when your Menasor has at least 30 damage, which is the critical ability, he becomes 30. So because Menasor is a type of, he's a brainstorm stick basically. You just want to keep playing your actions. You can do like your attack pumps or your secret actions, and you would basically get to keep healing from that every turn for just the second one. That is pretty interesting and needed ability because he had less health than the other ones, I believe correctly.
Yeah.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So starting, I think, is 35, and then with this, he'll go to 40.
Right. So yeah, the health, giving the repair option there is pretty nice, but also is like, since you are playing mixed pip, it will what's the word? It lets you play offensively and defensively. So it's the strat itself is honestly one of my favorites in this set, and that's because I just love Menasor for no real reason. But now I have a reason. So
Fair.
We did also give him the buff of the 1 attack. So we mentioned last episode when we were covering aerial bots that basically, like, to be a stat stick, which basically all of the combined modes are, you cannot fail to output damage. You need to progress the game. You need to end the game. Otherwise, you're just kind of an engine of nothing, which is a term that I should definitely copyright. That sounds awesome.
Engine of nothing.
But being base 7 attack, that's enough to really push damage. Going from 6 to 7 is an actual threshold in terms of like how easily you are able to push damage from that point. So that's one of the things we want to really hit home, is to make sure that these characters could really push damage out in that way.
Right.
Also, I want to point something else out. So notice that the language on the back of the stratagem specifically says the second action. So if your first action is brainstorm and 2 more things, you're going to repair off the second, or like the first action you play off the brainstorm. You're not going to repair any additional damage for any additional actions you take after that.
And if you want to see why that is, there's a video on Arbitrary Hero, our good friend Cameron and Alpha Trion Protocol member, of a very earlier iteration of Menasor where, that was a problem and it had to go.
And a video that should be titled, I don't think it's titled this, but it should be titled "Why You Test."
Right. Yeah. It was incredibly abusive. That's the least that I can say about it. But I'll put the link in the description if anyone wants to go see it, because it's a really, really mean version of this character. So what we didn't touch on earlier, which I want to reiterate about the Combiner as a package, is that they are an 8-star character, so you do get to play the 8-star and the 3 5s and another 5 in your board. You get to play the stratagem, which takes you up to 24 stars, and then this leaves you with the ability to play a Villainous Spotlight, which is exactly why our upgrade that we're about to look at, which is Lionized Sword, formerly known as...
Ionizer Sword. You keep trying to put the L in front of it. It's not Lionizer.
You want to know why? Because it should be Buster Sword, because that's just easier for me to remember. But that's besides the point.
It was originally Buster Sword.
Right.
More dictates it needs to be the Ionizer.
Listen, I probably still have Buster Swords somewhere in my area. I guarantee it. But anyway, so this is the upgrade that we created for Menasor, which is an orange-blue hybrid Stunticon symbol, Stunticon logo, and it's put on Decepticons only, and is when this is on Menasor Colossus, and he attacks, and you flip at least orange-blue, draw a card. So you can put this on your other Stunticons, obviously, just to get the +3 attack. It's particularly really good on the wheel turn when you can just throw it on your Motormaster, get to a 7 base, flip a couple things, deal a bunch of damage, and at the end of combat, or at the end of the turn, you get to combine, and then you just have the Lionizer Sword on your character. This card, it's obviously very good, even at a star cost for a card, because it does just give you a +3 out of an orange-blue pip. But we felt was necessary for this card, and for it to be that powerful, is because there is a good chance that the way that you would build this deck doesn't necessarily want an orange-blue. It doesn't require you to have an orange-blue. So we wanted to add the incentive to want to play this particular card. With a lower attack stat, it might just be like, oh, I'll just find an Energon Axe, and I'll just play an Energon Axe. We didn't really want that to be like a automatic go-to option, which is why this is the stat that it is, and it's also kind of that thing that Wyatt's been talking about a bunch about ending the game. Once you get this on your character, you're a base 10 attack character that gets to draw a card most of the time on your attack because your character already has Bold 1 built in. So
I've missed. On the draw trigger, I've missed. Just in case you're wondering, I've missed quite a few times.
So, yeah, the whole combination here is that this is the more middle ground combiner in our creation process. You know, aerial bots were naturally the control version. These were naturally the hybrid mix pip version, and then the Predacons were the all-out aggro version. So we decided to go with these two particular versions for a little bit of conservative reasons. Mainly, we wanted to test more about the Predacons, and I can probably tell you that you should expect to see them sometime in the near future. But I digress for now. This was just another like really fun character to get a hold of. The earlier versions, which is once again, I'll go back to that reiteration of why you test, is the first versions of this. You know, I was playing games with it. It felt really good. It felt really nice. It felt really comfortable. It had that ability where whenever you play in your second action plus, you heal a damage. And that was all great and dandy. It didn't feel that powerful. Well, then after that, we had a testing event with our playtesters, and a few of them got Menasor and decided to play, what's the card name that I'm looking for that I can't remember right now?
I think you're looking for War of Attrition is the card you're talking about.
War of Attrition, right. So War of Attrition, for those of you who don't remember, is a green-blue card that you can stack up to 3 of them in your hand because they're green-blues. And when you play them all, you get to deal 3 damage to an opposing character and heal 3 damage. However, the way his ability worked, that read deal 3 and heal 6. It was very impressive. If we go back to that gameplay that I was talking about with Cameron earlier, there was a game where I had combined with 21 damage on my character, and when the game was over, I had 18 damage on my character. That's a problem. So, yeah, these are the things that you can easily miss when you word cards a particular way, and it can really backfire and hurt you, and it just feels oppressive, and we wanted to avoid that. And that's why the change was made to only the second card gives you a heal, so you have that little itty-bitty incremental heal every turn, if that's the way the cookie crumbles on your hand and stuff like that. But this character, once again, was just so much fun to work with and complete, and it was so much different than the other combiners because of the fact that Menasor has an innate power ability built into the character of you can play 2 actions in turn. The other combiners don't have that same utility on them. So this created a lot more complications for us in the build process because he was already just better than the other ones because you just get Brainstorm to start the turn. It was incredibly powerful, and this was without doubt the more harder combiner to really fix and balance correctly to make it feel like it wasn't just over the top powerful. Whew. Any more additions to that?
I think you covered most of it. The only thing I want to really hit on is, you mentioned in episode 1 that there were 3 cards in the set with Sturdy. We have covered Huffer, we covered Survive. The third card is High Speed Chase, particularly the back strat that references Menasor. His quote-unquote critical trigger, once he reaches 30 damage on him, is that he becomes sturdy, which it's in particular a little bit of an odd one for him because of the nature of the fact that he can actually repair himself.
Mm-hmm.
So if you repair yourself a couple of times and then full block a couple of attacks, you can actually repair yourself below sturdy because you can go back to 29 in repair, 29 damage on you.
In a lot of the testing, you end up around the 30 number quite often. So there was like a game that I just played recently where I was at 30 and I played a hold-a-line. Well, I activated the hold-a-line, and then guess what? I went to 29. I was no longer sturdy. So then I got whacked anyway, and I'm just like, oh, this is interesting. So like the cap that it creates a very weird influx of if you heal a certain way, you might actually knock yourself out of contention and then get hit for something you weren't prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
It's an interesting dynamic, and honestly, kind of a fun dance.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, because like there will be times where you don't want to play a second action.
Yeah.
Because sturdy's very important.
It's pretty good. All right, so
I think that's all we got for those.
It is. We're gonna move on to it's my turn. All right, so I put a bunch of stuff on the screen. Well, let's scroll back here a little bit. We didn't really totally stress on this, but one of the big things for ATP2 was Junkion. You know, Junkion is with the end of Season 1, the last event of Season 1 was the Junkion format, and everybody really loved it. Everybody really enjoyed it, and it's something that we decided we're going to just make a part of our seasonal events. So with that, it was very important for us to create cards that affected that format to diversify that format, because with ATP Set 1, we didn't have rarities on the stratagems, because, in all honesty, I've said this on multiple occasions now, that we didn't plan for a format that rarity mattered. But now we have to, and we have to take that in mind and keep that along the whole track of everything we do moving forward, because it's going to be important for what cards we pick and choose to be allowed in that base level format that is Junkion. But with the stratagems, which I believe these are technically the first non-combiner stratagems that are in the set that we're going to be talking about, and there's plenty more to come after this, but these are specifically made with Junkion in mind, but give the addition to play outside of it, obviously. So our first one we have is Private RC, which is called Drop 'em, and it says your deck can have up to 1 extra star of cards. I'll come back to that in a second. It also gives RC, while your Private RC Special Ops Warrior has an armor on it, she has +1 attack. Now, if you look at Private RC, the character, you would already know that she very much plays into this mixed pip S faction of a deck. So that's why the playing an armor, you get the plus attack, because when you have a weapon on her, she gets the plus defense, right? Is that the correct wording on that character? So this is just a little play with that to give you the idea of, all right, well, you can have a benefit for either option here. But the big difference is your deck can have an additional star of cards. And as we talked about in Set 1, we had just introduced, or I'm sorry, in the first podcast of this, is that we just introduced star cards into the format. So this card gives you an additional incentive to play those star cards. And specifically, you know, the attack or the armor or the weapon, because you can get the extra bonus for her. Or if you are mixed pick deck, because that's kind of what RC plays into with her focus and all those other things, you can also now play Spotlights. It's an all-around really fun card for the format. RC was already seeing a small percentage of play in the format, and this just pushes her a little bit in the direction, along with giving her, I missed the +1 health, just to keep her character star on like curve with the other star cost at that level. Anyone like to add any addition to that?
I just want one small correction. So in RC's bot mode, when she gets a weapon, she has bold 1, tough 1.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Just that. But she does very much lean into mixed pip shells. The idea that you kind of like get refunded some of the cost of the stratagem through playing the star cards is actually really cool. You know, we see in full constructed in Wave 5, we saw cards like Science Officer, or I don't know the name of the one that Roadbuster has, or Stealth Mission, which are cards that let you, they kind of like cut some of the cost of star cards in half. They give you,
Right.
if you look at those as if they are 1 star, it gives you the star back of a star card and then another star of a star card. Then these are kind of like a similar stratagem in a slightly different way, where this is spending a star to get a star card into your deck, and then you get a small buff to your character. Because these are not big buffs. The RC one is a little bit bigger than the Barricade one, but Barricade one is still definitely a buff. And I think that like the idea that you're cutting some of the opportunity cost here is really huge, particularly for cards that are not green pips. So you're finding one of the powerful deck building attributes of green pips for cards that are natively not that type. And I think that's something that is an interesting design avenue to push down.
Right. Let's go to segment 2. Now, for what I forgot, I'm sorry. I don't even know how I did this. I forgot to tell everyone who spoiled these cards. Oh, that's right. It's Richard Wyatt. So thanks for doing that, Wyatt. But yeah, so our next card is Whatever It Takes, which is for Sergeant Barricade, Infantry Enforcer. And it has the exact same wording as Drop 'em does, where it says your deck can have up to 1 extra star of cards, and it gives your Barricade Tough 1. So Barricade is actually a pretty strong character in the format already because it gives you additional access to some of the better cards in the format, ironically, that are blanks, such as Blade Flurry, Ready for Action, and
Ready for Action.
Yeah, Ready for Action. And there is one other that I can't remember right now that's also blank.
ATP-2 IR Laser Launcher.
Yeah, that one. It has a really long name, but it's a +3 attack weapon. That's all that really anyone cares about.
I called it Layla for a while.
Layla.
Laser Launcher.
Sure. That's fine. I remember those. I remember that discussion on the podcast. Yeah. I can get behind that. But what this card does is the 7-star slot in Junkion is actually kind of cluttered. There is a lot of really playable 7-star characters in the format. So this just gives you the ability to go up to a, quote, 8-star character, but gives you a star card in your deck, and it also gives your Barricade a little bit more reach. So if you don't have like the bold action to get your Barricade in to guarantee you're going to get a blank pip, you get a little bit more, you get a second chance per se, or whatever it takes per se. I love the names of these stratagems sometimes. But
here's the thing, Dan.
Yeah, here's the thing, exactly. So the idea here is just giving you a little bit more reach on that avenue for building this character, along with maybe this tilts him into a more blue shell that we haven't really seen Barricade. We've only really seen him in the orange shells because, let's be honest, flipping blanks as a blue deck isn't really that fun. But maybe this just gives you a little bit more incentive to do those types of things, along with creating an 8-star slot in the decks that we really don't have a whole lot of options for outside of what? Mudflap? I mean,
Well, you know who we did have at 8 stars was Private RC. But if you look at her stratagem that we're printing here, we're kind of bumping what I would term the best 8-star presently in the format into kind of like the 9-star category, which doesn't really have a lot of options if you're looking honestly at the format. Yep. So we're kind of like creating a niche for a good 9-star character, but when doing so, we're kind of leaving a void in the 8-star character slot, giving Barricade a stratagem that enables him to play a little bit differently. I think this is one of the cool things about this stratagem, about Whatever It Takes, is that this is a stratagem that I think genuinely provides modality to the character. I think if you play him at 7 stars, he's going to want to go in a more aggressive shell. And I think if you play him at the 8-star version with Whatever It Takes, getting probably like a hands-free artillery is a star card that you're getting back from it. He looks a little bit different as a character. And one of the things to note about the Tough One is that his bot mode trigger says when this card battles.
Right.
So it cares about defense as well as attack. He has flexibility already built into him in terms of when you flip blank pips.
Right.
So.
Right. Is there anything else we would like to say about these stratagems, guys?
No? I think we're
right. Once again, this is just it's another avenue that we decided to take in the set as a subsidiary focus, which was Junkion, because of the Alpha Trion tournament series that includes Junkion at more than one stop, even in Season 2. And I can assure you that going forward, it's not going anywhere because everybody loves playing Junkion. It's just a ton of fun.
It is.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next spoiled card, which is Interrogation, which was spoiled by our friends over at Bayformers. This is Adam Edgemon. He goes by Bilmu in a lot of the his gamertag things for, I know, in our Discord and the main Discord and others. So shout out to the Bayformers guys. Thanks for spoiling this interrogation for us. Kai, what do we got?
Alright, so interrogation is a black pip action, and do 1 damage to one of your characters. Your opponent reveals their hand, and you scrap a card from it that has 1 or fewer combat icon from it. And probably the most important thing is that it is a common. So this card is designed as a potential out to one of the most powerful cards in Junkion, which is ready for action. If your opponent sees multiple ready for actions, it is really tough for you to come back from the game. So having a way to combat that preemptively is important, and also it's the only card that gives you hand control in the format, which is also a plus.
Right.
For if you want that.
Yeah, it is also a Decepticon card. Fun fact.
Yeah.
That's true.
Major Shockwave.
So Major Shockwave.
May like this card. It's possible.
Who knows? Maybe he does. Major Shockwave needs more love. That's an honest opinion.
Sure. Yeah. I can agree with that.
I do think this is a specific one that we should talk a little bit about, like the FAQ questions that the guys can see here. So can this take an improvised shield from an opponent's hand, Wyatt?
No.
How come?
Well, while improvised shield might have 1 color of combat icons on it, it actually has a total of 2 combat icons on it.
I like it.
And if you'll read the language on interrogation, it very clearly says your opponent reveals their hand and you scrap a card from it that has 1 or fewer combat icons. There's no reference to color on the card anywhere.
There you go.
So then in that aspect, what about Blake Pips?
Right.
Well, you'll notice that it says 1 or fewer combat icons. Having 0 combat icons is fewer than 1, and thus satisfies the criteria.
Fair enough. And we already just covered why you should include this, and the reason it isn't for the set, because one of the big monsters of Junkion is ready for action, is Blade Flurry, is that laser that we talked about that I'm never going to remember the name of ever, just letting you guys know in advance. All of those things are very, very powerful. There's plenty of other power cards that are just, single actions.
I mean, I can name a couple for you.
Sure.
Camion Crash is maybe the second best card in Junkion.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Followed by Leap into Battle.
That's pretty good. Hidden Fortifications. Another fine one.
That's fine. That card's fine.
It's fine. So yeah, there's
Erratic Lightning. Erratic Lightning is actually pretty good one to take.
Erratic Lightning, Supercharge. Good news is there's no grenade launchers in Junkion, but there are grenade launchers in Full Constructed that this card hits. So
it's true.
Yeah.
This card takes Energon Axe. It takes Grenade Launcher. It takes Gyro Blaster. Or
it takes One Shall Stand, One Shall Fall. It doesn't get nearly enough love. Just give it a shout out. It
takes a lot of secret actions. Belligerence. Yep. Boom.
Belligerence and Hostilities takes both of those cards. This card I think is slightly under the radar, I would say, to be honest, for the actual ability that it gives because of the particular things that it can hit. And yes, there is a cost on this card because we felt that it was necessary, because it could be you are playing this card for a very specific reason, to punish your opponent in a manner that isn't very possible anywhere else in the game, and specifically in Junkion, because there is no other card in Junkion that can let you scrap cards. And hey, maybe this gives you a reason to play your data protection as your crankcase. I don't know. Maybe. It's an option. All right.
Sure, Dan.
Moving on past interrogation. Let's go to it. We don't have Scott to talk about it, but we do have Mr. Wyatt to talk about it. Wyatt, can you finally bring up and talk to me about the spoiler by Team PTSD and Tim Teo of Catch Off Guard and Take by Surprise? Because for me personally, Catch Off Guard has the best art in the set, bar down. I don't care. But it
has the best art.
It's probably some of my favorite cards in the set. So give me it. What do we got for us, Wyatt?
All right. So ATP-1 is a set that is largely defined by a couple of cards. I think it is largely defined by the Metroplex stratagem. It is largely defined by Jetfire, the Jetfire stratagem. I don't believe in Destiny, and it's largely defined by the Straxus Lives stratagem, and then lastly, and I personally I think mostly defined by Here's the Thing, which is the Jazz stratagem. Here's the Thing has Jazz has natural built-in ability to combat him in the fact that he tells you how to beat him on the card. He says, "Put Pierce on me." Mm-hmm. Dark Mount has less natural ability, but if you can eat Dark Mount's hand, he really does he has recourse in that way. If you look at who's the first one I mentioned? My brain did the thing.
Metroplex.
Metroplex is answerable in ways that like turn off fold, sabotage armaments. There are in hostilities. There are tons of ways to answer Metroplex. The one card of those 4 really defining stratagems from ATP1 that does not have active, present, available recourse in many strategies is the Jetfire stratagem. And in particular, the first clause that says your Autobots, armors, and utilities can't be scrapped by your opponent's cards as long as you Jetfire in the field. So there are cards that are answers to this. Like there are cards that affect this in a negative way. You look at Inferno with his stratagem from the first set, which is one of the reasons we included Inferno as he did that. You look at Disarm, Debilitating Crystal, Gears. Like there are several cards that do this, but a lot of them feel like they just don't progress the game a lot, or they're maybe just not accessible to a wide variety of strategies for any number of reasons, particularly the character options. So we wanted to provide some more battle card options that felt like they were analogs to really actually playable cards, and give them access to both aggressive shells and to defensive shells that wanted to combat Jetfire strategies. It's the primary reason for these cards being printed. So now that I've described this context, let me tell you what they actually do. So Catch Off Guard is a blue pip action that says put an enemy upgrade on the bottom of its owner's deck. Before this card got a name, we're just calling it Tuck.
Yeah.
Because you're tucking away the card underneath your opponent's deck. This is especially good against Jetfire because it keeps the problem card that you're trying to answer away for the longest possible time. Putting an Ultra Magnus Armor on the bottom of your opponent's deck so that it's not in their scrap pile so they can buy it back with Jetfire, and it's not readily available at the top of their deck so they can get it back at a regular, by drawing it or by any number of means in that sense, is actually really, really huge. It buys you a lot of time. It's a card that's especially good against green pip cards, just tucking them away, hiding them for a long, long time. And then its counterpart in a more aggressive strategy is an orange action called Take by Surprise. You'll notice that those names are essentially synonyms for each other too, which I think is fun. But it says, do 1 damage to one of your characters, so similar cost to Kami Crash or Interrogation, which we just discussed. And then after the arrow, it says, put an enemy upgrade on top of its owner's deck. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, by the way, we were in testing, we were calling this card Stack before it had a name, because you're stacking it on top of your opponent's deck. So it was Stack and Tuck became Catch Off Guard and Take by Surprise, which I think are better names. But but you might be asking yourself why Take by Surprise does a damage to one of your characters where Catch Off Guard is free in terms of not having to do any damage to your characters. And the reason for that is that Take by Surprise is secretly also a combat action. And when I say combat action, I'm talking about things of the like of Belligerence, Supercharge, Reckless Charge, those types of things. This is actually secretly a combat action because the pip of the card you're putting on top of your opponent's deck actually affects their combat flips when you attack into them this turn. And that is a big deal. Yeah. Especially if you're taking something that's like a Ghost Shield or a Gyro Blaster and putting that on top, that is an enormous blow to the defense of the defender.
Yeah, it's just incredibly punishing all around. I mean, it's punishing enough when they lose their upgrade. Well, now it's even more punishing when you're like, oh, well, that upgrade's on top of your deck, and it's not even a blue because most of the best armors in the game or best upgrades in the game for defensive decks, they actually aren't blue. Ironically, they're just not. They're Gyro Blasters, they're Ghost Shields, they're any plethora of other things that really aren't blue anymore because most of the blue armors were tough armors, and tough armors aren't very good in the format anymore. And for what it's worth, the best tough armor was also an orange-green. So even if that were still a thing and could come around to still being a thing, well, even that would be punishing.
100%. And these are also cards. One of the things that we've noticed as a trend over time is that utilities become more and more popular.
Right.
Part of that is the prevalence of the card Disassemble from Wave 5, being an on-color card for Horrible to use as a way to answer hollow mana projectors. So people have been playing more and more utilities to try and get around that card. Catch off guard and take by surprise have no upgrade type restriction to them. Very much in a similar vein of Vaporize and Ramming Speed. Speaking of those cards, Dan, how are these cards different from, I don't know, Ramming Speed and Vaporize?
Well,
or Kai, whoever wants to answer.
I'll tell you what, Kai, you can have this one.
Well, I mean, so one of the things is, like you said, what takes by surprise, it affects combat, so that's the difference with that. With this, neither of them scrap, which is probably the most important thing when we're talking about like Jetfire and whatnot. So just being able to combat Jetfire whilst having your upgrade thing on color, like Vaporize and or Ramming Speed were, is a big deal, because that means you don't feel like you're losing that much on your combat flips, but you're still getting to answer one of the biggest metagame monsters that we have right now.
Absolutely.
That's what you're looking for.
That is what I was looking for. Also, there are just, over time, there are likely to be more and more abilities on characters that involve the scrap pile. So having access to removal that is just kind of like a native existing safety valve when it comes to those things is going to be, I think, really important for us as a design team, a development team going forward. And it gives the metagame itself tools to rotate and adapt. And I think that's very important.
Right. And another thing that I just want to point out, it might not be obvious to everything. There's a reason, a very, very particular reason why these cards are not green. There's just the cost of it, that the green pips in the game are all such repetitive gameplay. Like, the moment, that as a deck you're always going to have a Hollow Matter, and then your opponent is always going to have a Bashing Shield. Like, there's so much repetitive gameplay actions that occur that this is, once again, that deck diversity choice that we keep hammering home. If you're the kind of player that just wants to always have a green and wants to always have a card, well, now that's going to come at a cost, because those cards might not interact with every deck that you're going to come against in a metagame. These cards are not green, but their powerfulness and the utility on them is well and beyond any particular green in the format, because the ability to interact and put a card under, put a card on top, are very powerful abilities that we have never seen in the game before. It's also the reason why it was an option for the Overkill that we spoiled in the last one, that was spoiled by Vangelis. That ability is a repetitive theme, because we did feel that there needed to be more options than there were for the Jetfire stratagem in particular. But there's more ramifications here, is that this card and the fact that you can hit a weapon, a utility, or an armor, any of those things is really strong. And the fact that, once again, Enhanced Power Cell is one of the most commonly used cards, and that's for all decks, blue, orange, mix. All decks are playing a card like an Enhanced Power Cell or an Energy Pack. They're all playing these cards.
Or a pocket processor. They're playing one pocket processor.
Right.
One of the really powerful reasons this is good against green cards is because oftentimes those green cards are one-ups.
Right. So it's a punishing thing. For example, one of the more dominant decks in Titan 1, I talked about it last event, was Darkmount Sky Shadow. Darkmount Sky Shadow is reliant on that pocket processor, and more than often, you actually don't have cards in your hand. So what ends up happening is, if you take by surprise a pocket processor on a Darkmount, well, guess what? They can't get it back because they don't have any cards in their hand, because they just scrap their cards to deal damage. So this is a very punishing thing at every level of the game, once again, because it's now you put a green on top, that's not a blue. You're smacking them. If you're the blue version of the card, which you can obviously choose to do, you get to manipulate it and put it on the bottom, which means it's gone. The lifespan of the card in the game is minimal because you just removed it from the player's access. So both of these cards are incredibly powerful, and I think of what it looked like in Wave 1 when every deck had a ramming speed in it type thing. It was just like, oh, I had to play this card. These aren't necessarily that choice, but they're a powerful choice if you decide to make your deck a little less repetitive. We get that? All right.
Want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's move on. Oh boy, is this me? Right?
It is you, because we're past one because of Scott.
Yeah, we're man down. We're man down. All right, so Yes, we have a stratagem for the Master Builder. I just want to point this out because if anyone really gets the giddiness and the giggle that I had done the other night, where I made this big post about spoilers, and I had my whole last paragraph was just a list of names of things from the set, and I hope everyone eventually realizes it because I know I loved it and it was a lot of fun because I just love doing these things now. But let's talk about the Master Builder. So the Master Builder is a stratagem for Grapple, Autobot Architect. Now, I can tell you that throughout the lifespan, I would probably very easily say that Grapple has never been competitive ever. Just, I think I can very confidently say that. This card is interesting. So it is a star, of course, like all of our stratagem except for Metroplex. That probably won't happen again, just for we're clear. Anyway, this gives your grapple bold 1 and tough 1 and +3 health. Now, what does that do to grapple? Well, it creates grapple into a 13-star character, which, for what it's worth, has been a really, really tough spot in the metagame. Having a 13-star character is a huge cost on your character. However, the interesting thing about grapple here is that his abilities are actually fairly insane. They're very, very powerful. And with this, giving yourself a static, bold, and tough, it means you even have to work less to get to those things. So you don't have to go out of your way to like have a hidden fortifications down, or have to play a fight position, or even, to be honest, have to have a bold upgrade or tough upgrade on your character, because this, along with a correctly built deck and design deck, you will always probably be able to trigger when you want to trigger with your grapple, along with the ability of, well, I can still just flip my grapple over when I'm safe and deal 4 damage to a character, which is without doubt one of the most powerful flips in the game. And yes, the cost of it is I have to flip, I have to discard my hand and I have to have the battle icons, but dealing 4 damage out of combat is just, and not to mention on a character, like you don't have to even draw a specific card in your deck. You just have to have the right combination, the right puzzle. This Master Builder is a perfect name for this character and the Architect, because all of it fits so well in the puzzle that this can create for players to build this. I mean, even our own testers we've seen 3 or 4 different versions of this particular concept, and all of them are very intriguing. And it really actually gives this character a lot of life in the format, and I'm actually really excited.
Me too. I think one of the so if you read my last top 8 profile from, I don't remember which event this was. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it was the Invitational, maybe. Mm-hmm. One of the questions was, what is a character you'd love to see a stratagem for? And my answer was Grapple. When I first started playing the game, I played in Wave 1, and then I was around for the entirety of the Wave 2 spoiler season. I saw Grapple, and I was like, bam, that is my stuff. At that point, there was not a black pip, so I was like, there's only 4 pips. You just play all the greens, and you roll out some matrices, and you're good. And you just play work overtimes and treasure hunts. Grapple was like one of my first decks that I took to a weekly tournament near me and won. And you're gonna laugh, but I took a deck I used to call Fruity Pebbles, which was a deck that was too tall. I know, it was too tall, and it played Starscream Decepticon King.
Oh boy!
And it played Grapple.
Oh boy!
And it made use of the flip of Decepticon Crown for Starscream for stats, and then it also helped Grapple for stats because the white green was really huge.
Oh boy!
That deck was awful, but. But Grapple was an incredibly fun character, wow. And one of the things that I said, like, that's the character I want to see, and I think one of the earlier ideas for giving him a stratagem in that vein was to just like take. He says exactly 4 different colors of combat icons, and to remove that and replace the text with at least 4 combat icons. But I think the reason I hate that personally, and like we didn't end up going that route, is because it removes the puzzle. You talked about the puzzle during your discussion, Dan, that like the idea that like this character could be played in a number of different like macro archetypes, like non-blue, non-white, non-orange. Like the idea that those are all options is thoroughly interesting,
right?
And presents a completely different deck building challenge each and every time, right?
Yeah.
And I think that Grapple is just one of those cards that like, but if if this is to be as powerful as it has seemed in testing, then this might be a character that's actually reasonable to consider at 13 stars, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And the 3 health, pushing him to 15 health for 13 stars is actually a reasonable trade. It's on the lower end, but his base defense, if you're considering that you're going to trigger almost every time in bot mode, is like 5.
5,
So,
5 plus the blues that you're going to flip. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's 4 plus whatever blues you flip, and you're probably going to flip blues.
You're pretty much 7 or 8 defense like all the time.
Which is insane,
It's
but
absurd.
also there's a million Pierce cards, and Grapple hard folds, and I mean this. I've never seen a card lose to Belligerence harder, ever.
There is a game that will be released of gameplay footage of Wyatt absolutely thwopping me with Belligerence. I'm just like, I just die. Like, I just die. Like, what was the point of this game? You could have just been like, hey, Dan, I have a Belligerence in my hand. I'd be like, all right, you win. Like, it's
cool. Next game.
Like, I'm telling you, it was just so cruel. It was so cruel.
I do think one of the best part of that is, do you want to know how many copies of Belligerence are in that deck, Dan?
Oh, he had 1. Yeah, he had 1.
That's correct. That would be 1.
Thanks, Wyatt.
I drew it, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks for the reminder.
I drew it.
Before I do forget, we pass on. This was spoiled by one of Alpha Trion Protocols on Cameron, Arbitrary Hero. Thanks for Cameron for doing that. Awesome job, because I know you are probably just as excited for anyone about Grapple getting a stratagem. So, let's move on to... there we go. This is perfect for Kai. This is perfect. Kai, can you tell us what our friends over at the Shuffle Bus spoiled?
So it's a stratagem for Lord Megatron, and it is called Bow Before Me. While your Lord Megatron, Conqueror of Cybertron, has a Decepticon upgrade, he gets +1 attack and +1 defense. And when one of your Decepticons flips from alt mode to bot mode, each player scraps the top 3 cards of their deck. So one of the problems we were looking at with Lord Megatron is accelerating him so much to where he has to like play like the heat of battles and like all that stuff. Is that going to be too big of a negative player experience, which is one of the things we don't want to do when we're designing these cards. So originally it was just 2 cards, and when you flip from alt to bot mode, and that was fine, but we ended up bumping it up just to make it not like you can lean all in, you can play like 18 flip actions, you can play I don't remember what Wyatt was playing, but you can play whatever, like you can make it like combo all in.
I had hit and run, roll out, escape route, showing off, hunker down, and then I was playing him alongside 2 cars, so I had start your engines as well. So I had 6 different 3 of flip my character actions, and one of those cars was Night Racer, so she was a Decepticon to help trigger the stratagem. And then I played 3 system reboot because it's Lord Megatron. Like,
yeah, so you can go all in on the Lord Megatron thing and just like try and just like ping your opponent for like huge damage, just like as often as you can, or you can take it like slow and methodically and just use the fact that he gets whenever he has a Decepticon upgrade, he gets +1/+1. You can do that with say Scoundrel's Blaster, so it just becomes a +3/+1. Or like Terrifying Resilience, so it becomes like a composite armor type deal.
One of the more interesting ones we had seen in testing was Raider Sights. I thought that was a really cool...
yes, that also works. But there's a lot of ways that you can build the Megatron. There's a lot of ways you can attempt the puzzle. But ultimately, it just made him just more interesting of a character, because ultimately, when you're scrapping the top 3, my favorite aspect of the stratagem is the fact that both players' greens just don't matter, because you can't pick it up when you scrap it from the top. So it's like it hits on such a niche aspect of the metagame, and I love it. That's like, if I play the stratagem, it's because of that. So
I will say this: of the cards in the set, there are plenty of really fun cards. The fun that you have with Bow Before Me is like it's kind of hard to describe because it's just so weird. But Kai's totally right. Watching your opponent's one of Noble's Blaster go by, or their one of Pocket Processor go by, is hysterical every time. because they're like but
it's probably
that's
more
like
hysterical when it's their hollow matter, which is the answer to
Oh,
their
yeah.
Megatron. Just saying.
Yeah. So Megatron has a bunch of problems. Well, Megatron has a bunch of problems. The first of which being that it's hard to trigger him more than once a game without him just getting KO'd. The second of which being that you don't choose where that damage goes, so it's incredibly easy to mitigate with something like a Hollow Matter Projector, which is a green pip card, right? And the fact that like those are both things that you have to like work around, it was really hard. We decided that it was not correct for us to answer both, so we answered the problem of accelerating him, which meant that even if your opponent did get a Hollow Matter, let's say you have a couple of Ashy Shields in your deck, then you have recourse over the course of the game, and that you can maybe hit a second trigger and actually get value out of it there. And so I think that's one of the cool things. One of the things I think is important to note is that it's not, he doesn't get +1/+1 for each Decepticon upgrade on him. It's whether or not he has a Decepticon upgrade on him. So if you had a Raider Sights flipped into, well, I do not know the Battle Master upgrade mode name of his.
Oh, I don't.
If you had that, if you had that and a Scoundrel's Blaster, he would still only get +1/+1 from the Stratagem.
Right.
I think that's everything.
Yeah, I think
This one?
we covered that one. Yeah. Thank you again,
Cool.
Shuttle Bus.
Oh boy! The next one's
All right,
got a
so
lot of FAQ
we're gonna
questions
start.
next to it.
We're gonna start real quick. At the time of recording this, the character that is on the screen may not have been the character that was spoiled in its entirety, but we were gonna do our best of our ability to put it in there. Maybe if I have time after the fact, I will maybe even cut in and redo this section a little bit with a more accurate interpretation of what this character ends up being. With that, Wyatt, can you please tell me about Drift?
All right, so we might dub in my voice if this gets changed when we're reading what the card actually does, which would be hilarious.
Yeah.
So this is another one of our characters that is like an iconic character. So we mentioned Soundwave in the last episode, which was like one of the characters that is like a well-known character, someone that like the player and community base, the IP fans have connection to. Drift is another one that is one of the characters that like it looked like Wasi was getting really close to printing too, because his arc over the course of the story is that he starts out as a Decepticon named Deadlock, and then he becomes kind of like more of a rogue agent, and eventually, through a series of events, changes his name to Drift and becomes an Autobot over the long run of things. But what Drift is he's a car, melee, and in alt mode he is a 4/13/0 with stealth against Decepticons for 7 stars. And then it also says at the start of the game, do 1 damage to this. Then do 1 additional damage to this if you had a Decepticon on your starting team. So his starting line really becomes he's a 4/12/0 or so, generally, and then if you have a Decepticon, he's a 4/11/0 or so, generally. Then when you flip to his bot mode has got some super interesting stuff. You notice the Decepticon icon is on this character a ton of times. But on his bot mode, he's a 4/13/1, so he gets a defense there. And it says, you may play Master Sword on this character in an empty weapon slot. So he gets around the Master Sword exception for how to play him. And one of the things you'll notice is that that's kind of actually a theme with the character at large. So the damage that he starts with every single game also lets him kind of get around Energon Axe. Not directly, but in an indirect manner by starting the game damaged. And in addition to those ways, there's kind of cheat weapons, which is thematic to the character. You also have, when you flip to this mode, in bot mode, you may do 2 damage to this. If you do, this can attack untapped enemy Decepticons as though they were tapped this turn. So there's 2 abilities that are really emblematic in terms of like that effect, which is SRTB, be legendary warrior from wave 1. When he flips back to alt mode, he can attack untapped people, and then Razor Claw, the original Razor Claw from wave 2. We can both do that, and then also I guess supporting fire in wave 5. As a way to let basically anybody give it a try. But Drift has a little bit more restricted one. One, it's optional, so you can either do the 2 damage to him and get it, or not. And part of that is the reason that we don't really want this to be an ability he gets a bunch of times over the course of the game, because it can really ignore some of the importance of the kind of like management of combat as a resource. And then if you opt into doing it, he can only attack untapped Decepticon enemies, not untapped Autobot enemies. One thing to note here is that the ruling about Titan Masters does apply in this instance. So let's say that your opponent has a Perceptor with Grax on him, as the head that he's keeping back, that is a Decepticon. It is an Autobot, but it is also a Decepticon. So that is a character, an untapped character you could attack with Drift's ability should you choose to do so. And it's only for this turn. It will require another 2 flips to get back to this if you want to trigger it multiple times. And if you want to trigger it multiple times, you're going to deal yourself 2 damage in each instance. So he already starts at 12. Dealing 2, he's at 10. It's going to be pretty difficult if you want to have like a good damage output to regularly trigger that ability without having serious downside to it. I think that's all I've got for this guy. Did I miss anything, fellas?
I mean, this is, once again, that iconic character that we had discussed about the Soundwave of really wanting to just get something else into the game that people would be really excited about seeing, along with doing it in a really unique and fitting way for the character. And I believe this guy really hits on all of those things. We heard a lot of good response from the playtesters about the whole concept of this character. He was definitely a fearful character so far in testing, which I said, there's a chance that this might even be edited over a little bit, but in case it's not, in case we stick with this, there is still time for changing at this point for this character and the characters we're about to talk about next, because they're also on the chopping block a little bit still. So this guy has been really hard to manage. He's been really tough. He's really complicated, and he does a lot of things uniquely, which is really fun and awesome to see out of a character like this and out of a star cost like this. So it really fits a really interesting mold and stat cost in the game, and it's definitely it looks a bit silver bullet-ish, silver bullet-ish. There we go. And that has intent. I believe that if you really look at the last couple, I mean, really for the most part, the entire length of Wave 2, Cars hasn't really had much of a lifespan at all, because it's just so easy for their cars to just die, so you don't even really get to use their unique and cool abilities, which are normally found on their alt modes because of obvious reasons of start your engine, etc. So this card is kind of the opposite of that, where you get the cool ability on your bot mode flip side. So you actually get to utilize the character, right away if you choose to. So it's definitely a different concept for that mold of what we're used to seeing on cars like Bumblebee and like Prowl, when you flip back and get Bold 2 and all those things. So it's really interesting to see those types of things happen out of this star cost.
I don't have any more to add.
That's
Kai?
fine.
No.
All right, well, we're going to pitch it to Kai, even though we're all going to be talking about these guys. Kai, can you please tell me about the Seekers?
Sure, I can tell you about the Seekers, or specifically this faction of Seekers, which is Coneheads. So for this one, we're going to start with Dirge, I guess. So Dirge is a Seeker. He's on a plane and a melee in alt mode, and then he's a Seeker melee in bot mode. Alt mode, he's 5 attack, 12 health, and 0 defense. And him and Thrust both have the same ability where your starting star limit increases by 1 if you only have Seekers on your team. So they're the only Seekers in the set currently, but that doesn't mean this is the last set, or the fact that we can't do Seekers later on. So that's just giving us room for potentially doing stuff with Seekers later down the line.
Long-term planning.
Long-term plans, exactly. So for Dirge, in both modes, he cannot return from the battlefield or to the battlefield from the KO area, and that is because when he is in alt mode, he has the Revenge ability where you can add up to 1 battle card with no battle icons from your scrap pile to your hand. So obviously, I Still Function is a card that is very powerful, but it can also be abused when there's a specific Revenge ability that can just fetch it from the KO from the scrap pile. So there was just no way that we could just enable such an easily perceived loop. So that's why he can't return from the KO pile from there. So in bot mode, he is 4-12-1, and he's brave, and also sells the same cannot return to the battlefield clause. And when you flip to this mode, do 1 damage to one of your Seekers and 1 damage to an enemy. So this basically gives you a way to, since they're melee, you don't really have that much access to direct damage. So just being able to have a flip and do direct damage to whoever you want is also just needed, and also it fits in with the Conehead clause of they just get in and just do stuff even if they take damage for it. So fits in pretty well lore wise, and he's also a uncommon, which matters because of this next character we're going to talk about. Unless we want to talk about Dirge specifically.
No, I think we can go through the whole thing.
Okay, yeah, I'll just go through the whole thing then.
Yeah.
All right, so Thrust is okay. So all of them are just Seeker playing melee in alt mode, and then in bot mode they're Seeker melee. The Thrust is 4, 10, 1 in alt mode, and he also has a starting star limit increase if you're starting with all Seekers, and he starts with Brave in this mode. So one of the things that we were designing when with the Seekers was they were going to be like Brave. You could Brave juggle with them. So in a sense, to where Dirge is in Brave in bot mode, and Thrust is in alt mode, you could basically spread damage out between them and get a lot of mileage out of their Braves and or other modes. So that's the reason for why. And also most characters, and there's no character in the game that has Brave on both modes. So there's also that.
Right.
In bot mode, he's 5 attack, 10 health, and 0 defense. And each of your other Seekers has bold 1. And then he has a revenge trigger in this one, where you may play an upgrade from your scrap pile onto one of your planes or Seekers. So both of them have revenge triggers because in the lore they are very what's the word? Just like uncaring. Just they just get in there and do stuff, whether it hurts them or not. So reckless. There you go. Yeah, they're reckless. But then we get to the big boy of the Coneheads, and that is Ramjet. One thing I want to mention with Thrust, he's a common, so he's also going to be legal in Junkion, which is intentional. All right, so the big boy himself, Ramjet. He's 13 stars. He is a 6, 15, 2 in alt mode, and he cannot flip to another mode except with his own ability. And at the start of your turn, if this is your only character on the battlefield, flip this. So basically, it becomes like a centerpiece character to where he's not the flip intensive one, which is in most scenarios in this game, the centerpiece just is usually the one doing all the flipping. So having a uniquely designed centerpiece character like this was one of the design goals for this team specifically. And then when he attacks in alt mode, move a damage from one of your Seekers to an enemy. So it lets you abuse your Brave juggling potentially even further by just saving one of them out of direct damage range. All right, so for the bot mode, which is the grand prize of them all. So he's a 7, 15, 2 in bot mode. He cannot flip to another mode. And when this battles, do 1 damage to the battling enemy. This is before you do combat flips. So if your opponent attacks into you, you do a damage into them. And if they only have 1 HP, then they will get KO'd. And vice versa if he attacks into a 1 HP character. And then when you flip into this mode, you may play an upgrade from your scrap pile. So basically that triggers when he's the last character in play. So that basically lets you suit him up into a really big Titan piece character and just start trying to win the game after the other 2 Coneheads kind of did their thing and did some damage. So what do we have thoughts on these guys?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Yeah, because
I saw you, Dan. I saw you. You were like, So I think the first one I want to talk about is probably Ramjet. And that is because there is not a character that operates the way this Ramjet does, right? So Ramjet is specifically end boss material. That's what he is, right? The team, this prefabricated team, much in the very... Actually, let me back up just a tiny bit. So one of the cool things about like this Conehead, this Seekers lineup, is that you can play these characters individually. They're plenty powerful to play individually. But as a unit, they are designed to be a prefabricated team that has utility in other places, as opposed to the other way around, right? And so the fact that like you can play these characters together means that you're always going to have you're very, very likely going to have a setup where your Ramjet is your last character left, and he is oftentimes mostly undamaged, and then he is in his better mode in the other mode, right? So you kind of are building to an end game, and similar to the way that like the combiner teams are building to an end game. And so that thematic parallel is actually really one of the things we try to pursue here. But also, there is nothing like this Ramjet character in the game thus far. There is nothing like this character that is actively not flip intensive as your centerpiece character. I think the closest thing is maybe Sky Shadow, because the Sky Shadow decks, like, they don't involve a lot of flip intensiveness just due to the nature of the individual characters can't flip until they combine, right? But even then,
the only one that I would compare it to would be like Junkion with Ion Storm.
Junkion with Ion Storm is maybe the closest play pattern similarity.
Yeah.
I think it's a good parallel. Because oftentimes Ion Storm is last. Right. And if Ion Storm isn't last, oftentimes that's because the person who is playing that deck did not manage their combat well.
Right. But he's also a very less than flip intensive quote centerpiece character. So
very true.
He's kind of like in line with this.
Yeah, and he's also a plane.
Right. There you go.
And the Decepticon. A lot of parallels here.
Maybe he's even a boat. Who knows?
All right, let's calm down, then. I do think that like the next thing I want to talk about is just like the how to put this, the gameplay pattern of the Brave Juggle for this set of characters is super interesting. It is fun to watch. It creates a kind of like flip order that's not very normal. Like playing this team, the first time I played this team together, I got it wrong. I just didn't flip correctly. And I suffered because of it. And then it was one of those things like, once I learned it, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. This is really cool. It's very different. Because, and there are a couple examples where this isn't the case, but largely in the game right now, most teams are constructed to flip this guy, attack with this guy. Mm-hmm. That is oftentimes what you're doing, with the exception of Fangry. Shout out to Fangry for being just way better than he needs to be. But that's the Brave juggling aspect of things was probably the most interesting thing that I liked about this team. And I know you guys have plenty to say, so I'm going to leave it there and pass.
Yeah, so these characters, once again, the current versions you're seeing may not be the final printed versions. What I will say, knowing, not even seeing a video yet, shout out to Bleeped Out Productions and Lee, our awesome good friend Lee, for doing this spoiler, because I'm so amped and pumped to see this spoiler, it's not even funny. Like, God, I can't wait for it. And this is coming out after you have already seen it in the world, and I'm telling you 2 weeks before that I'm so excited for it. But these characters are just so you compare them to a pre-structured starter deck, right? Like, let's put it that way. Like, in some games you get this preconceived starter deck where it's like, oh, this is what you get, and this is pushing you in that direction. This is done a couple times throughout this set where it was not really done in set 1 at all. We just gave you 11 stratagem and said, hey, here you go, figure it out. In this set, we give you the combiners, aerial bots and Stunticons, and then now we're giving you these Seekers, and all 3 of them are a preconceived idea of juncture of where you want to go and how you want to do it. The interesting thing with these cards is that they are incredibly great together, but they do give you this ability to play outside of each other, which is also very cool. And what I believe is really interesting about them is that the stats on the characters are very intriguing for their star cost, and the intent to build, like, we tried to build these characters as a 12, 6, 7. Like, we tried that, and we couldn't make it work because we just couldn't justify the stats that were required for these characters at a certain star cost in other formats. Like, we couldn't come to the conclusion of what thrust had to be at 6 stars, because at 6 stars is a 5, 10, 0 with a Brave on the alt side. Like, it was just too powerful. It was like, we just can't do this. Junkion doesn't need that, and we really wanted one of these cards to be in the Junkion format. So we had to think outside the box, and we went with the star cost idea of, hey, if you want to play all Seekers, this is the way you can do it. It's still going to fit. It could be thematic, once again, long-term planning that we could plan for later, knowing that we already have the ground floor work done on these characters already. So that's a lot of fun to think about also with future design space. However, you guys hit it out of the park. Ramjet is from the moment we started testing this, Ramjet was just so cool. Like, I mean, the whole idea, the whole concept for him was just so much fun and intriguing and different. And he is the whole package. He is, why I called him the raid boss. It's not a joke. Like, you get to this dude at the end of the game, you're like, man, I have to probably do about 13 damage minimum to this character. And that's like if I threw a javelin at him or if I hit him with a Kamian crash, like things like this that like occur.
It feels like staring up a mountain.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and like don't get me wrong, like just as they're brave juggling, you could potentially juggle correctly too, to where you end up in the right spot where you need to be. But this character is very strong. He's very punishing, and he has he everything that's about him is right in your face. It's right there. It's not comparable to like a Perceptor or a Soundwave or a Jetfire where it's like a figure it out, build it up as you go along. You look at this guy and you go, all right, this is what my opponent's been doing the whole game. I know what's in his scrap pile. I know what's coming with the upgrade. I can tell where we're going with in those directions, but it's powerful and it's like we talk a lot about this in our design process. The manipulation of the scrap pile is a really really tough thing to do in the game. Another really tough thing to do in the game is revenge. This team does both of those things in a pretty powerful way. So I can't stress to you enough the level of changes that these characters have gone through in the last 48 hours. No. I didn't say 2 months. I didn't say any of those things. I said the last 48 hours because they have been that strong. They have been that powerful, and the just slowly tilting them back, because we didn't want to tilt them back so far to where they were unplayable, because it's very important that we get this type of concept, because the last thing I have to bring to the table, because we have a lot to say about this awesome concept, is 3 tall orange decks are they're just non-existent in the game anymore. We haven't seen it in a very, very, very long time, and these guys shout from the top of the mountain that they want to do that, and it is awesome to see it because we just haven't had it, and it's great for any of those players that like that type of deck. It's just been so long since we've had the ability to see this, because the characters that the Titans presented just didn't really. It wasn't the same feeling. Like, yes, is a let's just say like a angry Sky Shadow deck. That would probably be the closest I could see to it. Maybe the Swap Heads deck, in a way it's comparable to it. However, the way those decks manage, they still have extra resources of cards because of the heads popping off, etc. This deck is not that. It's just all your power is on the table to start the game, and it's just like, this is what it is. I'm going to do this. I'm going to juggle that. I have to make a conscious decision if I want to juggle or get my revenge trigger, which is also another thing that wasn't really pointed out yet. Everything about this deck is it's a decision point at all points of the game, which is really, really intriguing. Whew. These guys are going to be fun. They're going to be awesome, and I think this is one of the other ones where the testers just love this set of group, and they probably have gotten a little bit upset every single time we've knocked them down a peg.
And that has been several times.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, once again, I stated a little earlier, there's still a chance that the actual tech boxes or stats might be a little different come full release, come the spoiler video, which if that is the case, I'll make sure I do a little cut in and tell you what changed and why. But as a whole, this was the last character probably to be revealed and spoiled. That's my assumption, which is why we ended it with it. It's awesome. These guys are awesome. They're a lot of fun. They're very interactive, and it is a pre-constructed thing, but it's not a very easy to figure out solve problem, because there is a lot of decision points that comes with this character, because it's not that simple, easy, oh, I flip this guy. Like, no, you have conscious decisions of, well, which guy am I going to flip? Do I want this revenge trigger? Do I want this brave? Like, am I trying to protect that character? All these things occur so often throughout the game that it's a decision point for you, and then it's a decision point for your opponent as well. And it's just really cool. Yeah. Any last thoughts on the Coneheads?
They're dope.
They are dope.
All right.
I think that's all I've got. Dan, you want to close this out? I know it's been a heck of a filming session.
Yeah, yeah. So let's just take that away for a second. Boop. So yeah, that is the ATP2 spoilers. We felt it necessary to do these podcasts to go a little bit more behind the scenes of the deck designs. As stated, I have footage for most of them, if not all of them. I'm not 100% I have it all because a lot of the footage that I had required were from cards like from, day zero. So the text from day zero to day where we are now are just so drastic that it's probably not even worth looking at because it's not giving you the card in its actual context that it is now. But we do have plenty of footage from the more recent versions of things like that, so I will be releasing that alongside with the spoilers, hopefully, to get some gameplay interaction so you guys can see all the testing and where we got from point A to point Z type thing. What you can also expect of this Protocols podcast is that this is something that we're going to be doing now moving forward. Instead of at the end of it, we plan on doing it in the middle and more like probably I would like to hope as like a bi-weekly situation of like here's an update on what we're doing and what's going on and what the pinpoints are for a particular set and stuff like that. Is there anything else you guys would like to add?
We miss you, Scott.
That's funny.
I have a specific thing I want to mention before we go. ATP2 and Alpha Trion Protocols. We're not all on here on this podcast, but I just want to give a big shout out to Cam, to Gian, to Vince. I want to give a big shout out to he's not technically part of like Alpha Trion Protocols, but Nate Peterson for giving that big MSE file. It's been a huge instrumental tool for us. I'd like to shout out to Zero for Teletran 1, including a lot of the stuff for deck building, and all of our wonderful people like providing spoilers. It's a huge, it's just a great experience to be able to operate with and engage with the community in a way like this, to provide a labor of love that eats, honestly, probably too many hours of our days to produce. But it gives us like a great feeling of joy to see how much people enjoy and even interacting with even the constructive criticism, even interacting in that way. We want to hear that as well. I will happily engage with you, public or private.
Yep.
That's fine by me. And I think that I'm going to ramble if you don't stop me.
Well,
so,
the one thing that you forgot to mention, and I have done it over and over again, and I'm going to keep doing it, the playtesters.
Yes.
I can't thank you guys enough. There is many of you, I don't want to specifically name anybody, but you guys were all incredibly amazing and invaluable to this whole project. No, we cannot play every single game. It's just too much for the subset of people that we have, but just the ability to sit aside, watch two of our trusted people in the game play cards, and just sit there and evaluate. The very, very, very early on alpha testing event that we ran, that set a course for the combiners and for cards that have not been seen again, right? Because anyone that watched that event on my Twitch channel, you'll know that we just spoiled the entire set, and there's some things on there that were not. They're not there anymore. They're gone. They're bye. See you later.
And they deserve to be gone. They do not deserve to stay around.
Right. So all of those things are just God. I love you guys so much. The project itself, it really is a passion project for us. It's important for us to do these things to keep the game, the competitive side of the game, really in tune, along with giving anybody the ability to play any of these cards and enjoy these things. It's not just always about competitive. It is where we intend for these cards to be played. But the hope is that anybody would enjoy playing these cards anywhere. So I just can't thank everybody enough. I mean, the entire Protocol team, you guys, once again, we really sunk into this set. it's funny because what I had said to a friend that doesn't play the game, we're just friends and we talk, and he asked like how the project was going and stuff like that. I was like, the interesting thing was that we decided to start with stratagems in set one because we thought it would be an easier way to learn the mechanics of the game, right? Like we thought that would be the better idea, the better course of action. However, I don't think that was the case. I really don't. I think we actually learned a lot more by building a character from ground zero, or realistically
Combiners.
taking a very specific molded character in the game, like the combiner form, right? The combiner mode character. The way that they were created and designed by WotC, that information correlating to everything else we're doing was I can't even tell you how important it was, because we learned so many things about the game and the way that stats are even labeled in the game because of combiners, and all of that information going forward is just going to make it's almost like a shortcut now, because we just know like we could look at a character now and be like, no, it can't be that way. Like it's honestly that quick. Like it's that fast. Like nope, that doesn't work, can't do it.
And we're just going to get better at that over time too.
Right. So it's really cool. It's really interesting. I mean, like I said, everything in set one was just stratagems. So now we deeped in and we created a keyword. We created a new way to interact with combiners. We created an actual team that we want people to interact and play with, and then the battle cards themselves are a whole other interaction of things that we feel curve the meta in a better direction and give people more respectable options that they can choose from. Because once again, the whole project here isn't about to overtake what it was in the past. It's about aiding the current game and giving actual deck design choices. And that is the biggest recourse that I think that we have succeeded in so far. I mean, if you go look at the top 8 lists from these things, like there are so many different battle cards that are seeing play now that honestly I could 100% tell you have never seen play before. Cards like Cooling Vents, cards like Rapid Conversion, cards like
I'm looking at you, Electrified Spikes.
Right.
Looking at you.
Electrified Spikes. I mean, when's the last time anyone played a Dino Chomp? I mean, Ghost Shield. Realistically, how many times have you actually seen a Ghost Shield stick and play and see the light of day? Like, so many of these different types of cards that have now filled deck list and created a true... There's not just that's an orange-black shell and it's just a different set of shaded characters. Like, no, it's like, this is a different deck, and it has a different core to that deck, and it has its own identity. And I think ATP1 did a great job of creating that, and ATP2 is only aiding towards that direction, and it's awesome.
I'm really proud of what we've done here.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah, I really hope everyone enjoys this. I mean,
me too.
We just, oh God, I can't even fathom the amount of man hours that went into the last 2 months of this project, which is also, I mean, I'll be the first to tell you now, we are extending. We're extending our own project time to give ourselves another month. The holidays have a lot to play into that, because we do know that Thanksgiving and Christmas all fall in between the next set design project. So we are going to extend our project time to 3 months instead of 2 months. And I think it gives us a little bit of breathing room to where we're not doing this FAQ while still toning the last couple of cards, because they still need it, to be honest. There's a good chance that we're not completely comfortable with Drift and completely comfortable with the Seekers. So giving ourselves the extra couple weeks and our playtesters,
we're talking small details too.
Right.
Like they're not going to be like massive.
No,
like
no,
very
yeah.
Small
the
things.
Characters that you had seen, like my easiest comparison is maybe there's one less attack, maybe there's one less defense, maybe it's a damage after the battle, like things like that. They're still going to be the identity of what the character is right now. It's just to us, it's about finding what is necessary and not what is unnecessary. So, for example, if you look at that whatever it takes stratagem with Barricade, originally that stratagem had bold 1 and tough 1. Well, what we realize is that's not necessary. You don't need to give that character bold 1. If you miss on attack, you now have an innate ability of a little incentive to maybe get it on defense. But you didn't need, if the point of that character is that he can only have one blank card, so it doesn't matter if you hit 2 blank cards. So you don't need it both ways. You only needed it one way. And that's just one of the interactions that I can tell you over the course of this set design that we have figured out and handled correctly. I'll go back to the Menasor as well. Like, we had realized pretty quickly that, like, combiners on day one were probably the most ridiculous things anyone ever seen. I mean, once I'll go back and watch that Cameron video that I'll post in the link. You'll see how absurd they were. It was just there was nowhere in the world that you would ever combine on turn 2 as Menasor and lose a game. It wouldn't have been possible. So it's the whole set design and everything we learned was just it's just so helpful for us moving forward. And once again, thanks to the playtesters, thanks to the protocols, and honestly, we had in the way that we do the testing, most of the time it's in a public room on our Discord, on the VectorSigma.info Discord. So there were plenty of people that came in that were just hanging out in the Discord. I honestly don't know how many numbers are in the Discord. I have no idea. It's probably about 100. I don't know, maybe a little bit more. But plenty of people had the ability to go in and watch these games being publicly tested because everything we're doing is always in that manner. I will say this time we didn't do as much live streaming and stuff like that, which is really just a time restraint thing. Unfortunately, it didn't really work up. I mean, me and Wyatt ended up testing at like 2 in the morning. Kai and I ended up testing at 2 in the morning. Like, the time frames didn't work out where everything was easy this time. But hopefully we can correct that a little bit too and get more involved with the live streaming again. I think I've rambled on more than Wyatt even was planning on rambled on. Kai, would you like to kill it and just say anything else?
No, I mean, I'm just really proud of the team and all the work that everyone did. So, good job, guys. Hopefully we didn't miss anything.
Yeah. We will. I tell you what, the text, right? Text. Christ, text. So we are definitely doing our best to, before the final PDF is put out there. Honestly, guys, if anyone watching any of the videos, anyone seeing any of the cards, if you notice something that's wrong with the cards in the text, if there's a missing period, if there's an N before an O in Decepticon, any of that stuff, like, please let us know. Let us get it fixed. So, like, with a proper PDF, we'll have everything correct. We're not perfect, obviously. We all can make mistakes, and that goes for anybody that's doing this. So we just want to be sure to get it as perfect as we can possibly do it. So when you guys go out and print this out, you're not worried about printing something else out again. All right, are we good? Thank you. If you guys stuck through this entire time, if you've been supporting the project of the Alpha Trion Protocols, thank you very much. If you're new and this is your first time seeing it, you weren't really around for set 1, I hope you enjoy set 2, and I hope you go and you look at set 1. What is very, very important to us, I didn't say this before, but it was very important for us to not erase the work that was already been done, but add to it. So that's exactly what this set 2 does. It's not erasing any of the cards from before. It's not power creeping in a certain direction. It is just adding to the pool of playable things for a deck diversity choice that anyone can pick up and play. And with that, I will thank everyone once again, and we'll see you guys next time.